This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. And in today's mini show, we're bringing you a special episode focused entirely on the state of politics in Wales as we look ahead to the 2026 Senedd elections and a period of political flux, not just in Cardiff Bay, but across the UK. Joining me once more is the sharpest mind in Welsh political life, award-winning journalist Will Hayward, who is consistently delivering both the big stories and the quieter trends shaping the nation's political future. Welcome back, Will.
Oh, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about everything from the growing influence of Reform UK in Wales to how the new EU-UK agreements might impact the devolved programmes like Taith, which we talked to you about in the last dedicated Welsh episode we did. That is the Welsh replacement for the Erasmus Plus scheme. And of course, we'll be delving into what lies ahead, as Labour certainly faces both opportunities and threats in the next Senedd term. So, Will, let's start big. How would you characterise the current state of Welsh politics, and how different is the mood compared to a year out from the last set of Senedd elections?
I mean, it's really, as someone who's covered Welsh politics for a long time, the strangest thing is we're now in a state of flux. There's a feeling of change. And one thing you never would have associated with Welsh politics historically is that feeling of change. So I think we've said before about Welsh Labour being the most successful Democratic Party in history, biggest party since 1922.
Wow.
I know. And that does actually make them the most successful Democratic Party ever. They've been the largest party in Wales for over 100 years. But it looks like at the next election, they could be in third place. And before the last one, that was 2021. It was still, we were in the kind of throes of the pandemic. We'd gone through that Christmas with the Omicron virus and or the Delta variant, I think. Sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about all the different variant names.
Oh, so many variants. People were really high on Mark Drakeford, our first minister then. He felt like he was a real juxtaposition to Boris Johnson. He seemed thoughtful. He seemed to read his brief. And people were really excited by Welsh Labour. And they got 30 of the 60 seats in the Senedd. They did really, really well. The Welsh system means it's almost impossible to win a majority, but they were one short of a majority, which was a very big result for them. But this time, it looks like the lead, who is ahead in the polls, is jockeying between Plaid Cymru and who are equivalent to the SNP in Wales.
Yeah, I think I saw a Find Out Now poll out this week with Reform on 29. Plaid hot on their heels at 27, with Labour falling right back to 18. And I think there was a YouGov showing not dissimilar numbers, but switching Reform and Plaid in first and second place a week before.
Plaid have been ahead of Reform in a couple of polls, but the latest one has put Reform just ahead. It kind of does seem too close to call. But the thing that has been consistent is Welsh Labour on 18%. That's two polls in a row which have shown that. And these are significant polls. They're MRP polls. They really do go into quite a lot of detail. So, yeah, for a person who's covered Wales where nothing changes, everything seems to be changing.
We are just over a year out from those Senedd elections. What are the main dynamics at play right now? In terms of, obviously, we know who's falling down in the opinion of voters and who's up, but what are the issues that are driving that at the moment?
One thing the pandemic did, it made people in Wales aware that devolution had happened and we had a Senedd, we had a parliament and we had our own government. And I mean, before the pandemic, it wouldn't be weird to say that a very significant amount of people in Wales didn't know it wasn't Westminster running our hospitals and our schools. And in Wales, we have serious problems with waiting lists. It's performing, our Welsh NHS is performing worse than in England on lots of metrics. The education is doing poorly compared to other parts of the UK based on the PISA international standings. And poverty in Wales is really high now.
Yeah.
Although those areas are devolved because of how the UK is governed and how funding is allocated, you can't put all of that at the Welsh government, but ultimately the buck does stop with them. And people are now actually taking notice and thinking, actually, those people in Cardiff Bay run my hospital and not people in Westminster. The other thing to note, which I think does get missed, is the absolute crumbling of the Welsh Conservatives. So they are, at the moment, the official opposition. They're the second largest party in the Welsh Parliament.
Currently polling at barely in double digits.
Barely in double digits. And the problem for them of the new electoral system, which is coming in Wales, is once you fall under kind of 12.5%, you have a chance of being completely wiped out. So there are scenarios where there is 2 or 3 Conservatives in the 96, which will expanded 96 Welsh Parliament, which is an absolute complete fall from grace and kind of a real testament to, and probably a word of warning for their colleagues in the UK Conservative Party.
We saw in the spending review, Wales getting an extra, I think, 23 billion addition to the Barnett formula allocation. Can that make a significant difference to Labour's fortunes within the next year in the run-up to the Welsh elections? Will that help Welsh Labour actually deliver on some of these issues around poverty and health that you've mentioned that are really hurting them in the polls?
So you're right to say that the spending review pushed the total Welsh budget, the block grant that we're getting up towards 23 billion, which would be the highest amount since devolution. I speak to people within Welsh Labour, and really UK Labour have really screwed them over. So there's a few issues. Rail funding is a big thing in Wales. So HS2, which obviously it's in the news as we record this today, but it's going to not be until 2033 until it's finished. But a big issue in Wales is that was defined as a Welsh and England project, even though none of it is in Wales. And what that has meant is, this was 10 years ago, this was defined. Scotland and Northern Ireland are going to get a consequential from that. And Scotland's going to get about 4 billion. But Wales is getting nothing because the Treasury has decided to define it as an England and Wales project, even though it isn't. Now, Welsh Labour and UK Labour before the election said that this was an injustice and this needed to be righted. But in the spending review, Wales has really not been given much at all compared to what it is owed from that. So that is a really, really big issue. The disability benefits as well. The changes to disability and PIP are going to hit Wales harder than other parts of England. So of the 10 areas which are going to be most hard hit by the changes to disability benefit, 4 of them in Wales. So 40% are in Wales, whereas Wales is only 5% of the UK population. This expansion of the budget, although it'll be better than contracting the budget, it doesn't really come close to helping Welsh Labour deal with the challenges they have. They've called for a long time for changes to the Barnett formula, changes to devolution and the powers that they have, because, it is an absolutely crazy system when you dig into it, how powers are allocated within the UK, especially to Wales when you compare it to Scotland. And there has been no appetite among Keir Starmer's administration to change that, and that has caused a real conflict between Welsh Labour and UK Labour. So yes, any extra money to Wales is welcomed, but I think it is pretty fanciful to suggest that this will move the needle much in terms of Labour support in Wales.
It's fascinating that you say that. We had a Liberal Democrat MP who represents a Sussex constituency on the main show last week, James McCleary, the MP for Lewis. And he made a kind of similar point that there has been this overcorrection within Number 10, focusing on the red wall at the expense of everything else. And that the southeast of England so often gets lumped in with London and the southeast. And actually, you do have huge pockets of deprivation along the coast in particular, but also some rural communities within the southeast. But because they are so often assumed to be, and lazily so, as wealthy as London and getting the perks of London by being, within its commuter belt in many areas, that actually there was almost nothing in the spending review at all for them by virtue of their proximity to the capital and this ideological positioning to really focus on red wall voters ahead of the next election. So let's stick with Labour, Will. How is the party in Wales positioning itself in terms of connecting with rural and post-industrial communities. Obviously, we've had the inheritance tax issue, which probably doesn't affect Welsh farmers in quite the same way as, the large landowning farmers in England. But at the moment, what reason is Welsh Labour giving rural and post-industrial communities a reason to vote Labour?
That's a very good question. So although Wales doesn't have the large farming estates that you see in England, in some ways it can actually be more damaging for Wales because Wales has a high proportion of tenant farmers, and landowners who own farms but rent them out are much more inclined to, once those estates stop being useful for inheritance purposes, they are much more likely to say, well, actually, we'll make this a solar farm, we'll use this for tree planting.
Or sell it.
Yeah, or sell it for those purposes. And that directly impacts on the tenants there because they have no recourse to stop that. I think what is interesting when we talk about post-industrial areas, so areas like the South Wales valleys, areas like Senedd, which Reform have really aggressively targeted. What UK Labour seems to be missing, which Welsh Labour do get, but UK Labour it just hasn't sunk through, is that all of the data suggests that Labour voters in Wales are just not going to Reform. They are going to Plaid Cymru. Tory voters and people who previously didn't vote in Wales are going to Reform, whereas Labour voters are going to Plaid. And this is why issues like kind of HS2 and Wales feeling forgotten is such a...
And Scunthorpe rather than Port Talbot.
Yes, exactly. Oh, absolutely. So I always forget that you guys on this podcast do your research so much more than anywhere else. I love it. I just normally when I come on, I to certain shows, you talk about Wales and you feel like you have to say, look, it's not spelled WH. I feel like you guys are on it. So the decision to nationalise Scunthorpe, whereas Port Talbot was just apparently just an expedient kind of casualty of a world capitalist system, whereas in Scunthorpe it was apparently a vital national interest. Anyway, let's not go down that tangent too much. But these are absolute gifts to Plaid Cymru. So although Reform are doing well in areas which were former Labour heartlands, people who are now going to Reform are not going to them from Labour. People there have left Labour years and years and years ago. The gift is for Plaid Cymru, and Plaid Cymru are really aggressively targeting those rural areas of Wales, which are often Welsh-speaking. Plaid are, they have a lot of socialist policies, and very rarely around the world would you see rural areas voting for socialist parties. But because of the Welsh language element that we have in Wales, they are moving towards Plaid Cymru. And I think what Mark Drakeford was always very good at was putting the Welsh in Welsh Labour, whereas the party now have positioned themselves so much towards UK Labour, who just aren't that popular in Wales. So they're
not that popular anywhere else either.
No, I don't know. I said the other day that if I was Reform, I would want Labour to be doing exactly what they're doing. And if I was Plaid Cymru, I would want Labour to be doing exactly what they're doing. And if both your right and left flank are loving your work, then you are probably not doing the right thing.
Quiet Riot. The rural way of life is about making everyone feel at home. Tractor Supply chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform intelligent customer service. Together, we put the power of AI to work across 2,200 stores, keeping things running seamlessly inside, curbside, and countryside. This is elevated customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Quiet Riot. So Plaid, how are they positioning themselves in policy terms as that antidote for more left-leaning sentiment within Wales and the Welsh-speaking community?
So in a way, they are, what Plaid have never had to really appeal to Welsh-speaking communities apart from just existing. The fact that they are, speaking up for Wales inherently does appeal to those areas. Whereas what they're toeing a bit of a tricky line now, because they're trying to appeal to the kind of liberal people who might live in cities and the more small C conservative parties that might live rurally but not speak Welsh. And actually, they're having to say quite different things to those two groups. And in a way, what they're doing, perhaps ironically, they're kind of doing a bit of a Keir Starmer, what he did before the last election, the general election, where basically he's kind of not saying nothing, because the incumbent is so unpopular. So Plaid are trying to allow themselves to be all things to all people, but crucially, they are putting Welsh independence as an issue on the back burner. Adam Price, the previous leader of Plaid, they've got a new leader now called Rhina Piolleth. Whereas Adam Price was all about Welsh independence, the current leader has kind of said, well, actually, one day we want to be independent, but at the moment we just want to make Wales work better. And that has gone quite a long way to making them much more palatable for people who just don't agree with Welsh independence as an issue. It does seem to be working. I mean, Plaid Cymru, because they've been in opposition forever, they absolutely love policy. They live for policy, and they've put out some quite detailed reports on how they would try and fix the myriad of problems in Wales, which is quite a juxtaposition for Reform, who
haven't even told us who their first minister might be.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even have a Welsh leader. So Plaid seem very serious. I mean, I think it's almost scaring them. But oh my God, after all this time, we might be in government because of how our electoral system works. Although even if Reform got slightly more votes than Plaid, it's going to be almost impossible for Reform to form a government. Whereas Plaid Cymru absolutely could. So it's a real interesting point in Welsh politics, and I can't really believe what's hit me as a journalist covering Wales.
So Reform UK is incredibly clear that it is aggressively targeting Wales ahead of these elections. They haven't told us who their cabinet might include. We have no idea yet as to who the First Minister would be if they are successful in being able to lead a government, if not form one entirely of their own makeup. Are there any names in circulation?
Reform are a bit weird because there's actually quite a Welsh contingent around Farage, which is interesting. Their voice in Wales at the moment is a man named Llŷr Powell, who worked with UKIP. There's also other names that I've heard banded around, are people like Mark Reckless. So, I mean, he defected to UKIP and became, I think, their second MP, but around just after Brexit.
Is he Welsh? I thought he was.
He is not. That has not stopped them though. So he does live in Wales, and he was a Senedd member under UKIP when they won 7 seats back in 2016. Kind of hilariously, those 7 seats by the end had gone into 5 different parties. There was UKIP, the Brexit Party, the Abolish the Assembly Party, some independents. So it will be chaotic, whatever they do.
And how are they campaigning in Welsh political circles? I'd heard that they were turning up at football games to drum up support. They were at the Wrexham v Exeter match. Like, what are they doing to recruit that the other parties just aren't?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few conversations recently with people within Reform, and there's been several by-elections, council by-elections, and actually, while they're obviously targeting them to win them because they want to have that view of momentum, that what they've done in each of these seats is different stuff. So they've used different literature, they've used different talking points, they've used different messaging. And what they're doing is they're using these as test cases ahead of the Senedd election. They actually refer to Wales as ground zero. That's how much they're focusing on it, which is odd because that's also the name for where the Twin Towers fell down, but I don't really want to dig into their mindsets. They're aggressively targeting Wales, and Farage did try and put some of the meat on the bones when he was in Port Talbot last week, when he said that he would consider reopening the mines in Wales, which, I mean, I'm happy to go into why that is absolutely insane. And actually, I don't think will gain the traction he thinks it will. You mentioned about them going to Wrexham, Exeter, and they are targeting that kind of, I think, stereotypical kind of football fan. But Welsh, interestingly, and this might belie some naivety from them, Welsh football culture is very different to English football culture. Like the Welsh independence movement is really entrenched within Welsh football. So football in Wales, especially international football, is much more associated with nationalism in terms of Welsh independence than you would expect whereas Welsh rugby is seen as much more of a kind of an establishment pursuit. So, but yeah, they are very aggressively targeting it. They haven't named a leader. They say they're going to, but that remains to be seen. They've just hired 4 more people full-time concentrating on Wales, because at the moment it is just that Llŷr Powell guy who appears to be targeting it. So it is very much their overriding priority at the moment.
I do just find that so interesting that they're basically doing a spray and pray approach to campaigning. We'll do everything test that, use that as a maxi focus group and tactical message testing, and then we'll double down on the ones that we think are getting cut through. Whereas I just don't see that level of creativity coming through from any of the other established parties in terms of going to people where they are rather than expecting people to come to them. Let's move on. Last time you were on, we had a brilliant discussion about the Welsh replacement for Erasmus Plus in the Taith scheme. Listeners, you can go back and listen to that show to get up to speed with what Taith is, how brilliantly it's working, etc. We'll leave a link in the show notes to that. But Will, I wanted to talk to you about the recent UK-EU summit between Starmer and von der Leyen that happened on the 19th of May. And a kind of surprise thing that came out of that very few people were expecting was talk of the UK potentially rejoining Erasmus Plus. If that were to happen, what do you think it would mean for the Taith scheme? Does it render it redundant, or is there a case for keeping both?
I think there's absolutely a case for keeping both. It's really heartening how well Taith has done. It really has. It's catered to people who just wouldn't have been able to engage in the Erasmus scheme. The EU has been trying to make the Erasmus Plus scheme less higher education centric and more inclusive, but has actually struggled. And a part of the reason that it struggled to do that, and by the way, I think the Erasmus scheme is a fantastic idea and it's really good. I know people who've used it and it was kind of life changing for them.
1 million babies were born because of Erasmus as of the 2016 referendum.
Wow, that is impressive. What I think has been good with Taith is it's been really good at targeting people who just would never even have a chance to go abroad. So it's not all about going away for a year. I mean, it works with like youth offending services. I mean, it's been really, really effective. And I think it actually is really complementary to Erasmus Plus. People I've spoken to actually from Taith think absolutely we should join Erasmus Plus because the budget's there just exceeds anything you could ever dream of with Taith. But Taith is, because Erasmus, the reason it's always struggled, Erasmus, to change and to be more inclusive is because essentially it's working across so many different education systems and so many different approaches, whereas Taith is able to be, it's on the ground, it's able to target areas of deprivation, areas which need that more tailored support. And actually, I think they would both work really well together. And what I think it would be a real shame is that the Welsh government would produce something like Taith, which is really good and really effective, and just think, oh, actually, we could save a couple of million quid here if we go back into Erasmus.
Yeah.
So short-sighted. Very few good things came out of Brexit. And Taith is one of them, that we were able to take advantage of the fact we're a small country and can do something a bit niche. And if we then were to go, oh, actually, no, we can get rid of that, I think it'd be a real shame.
Well, that is really, really helpful. And listeners, we're going to leave details in the show notes to Taith. If you're listening from Wales, you've got young people in your life who you think would benefit from it, please make that your call to action. Spread the word about it. Encourage people to get involved. And I'm going to close, Will, with a question that, again, is a big one, but I think for our listeners is a really critical one. If you had to identify one underreported trend, story, emerging issue in Welsh politics that we should all be keeping an eye on ahead of that critical 2026 election, what would it be?
Can I have two? Is that all right?
You may have three if you really want.
Oh, well, fine. Okay, I will. The things I think that people should look at, the first one's a bit dry, but it's an electoral system and what a difference having a proportional system makes. So reform in Wales are polling about the same as reform in England. But there is just simply no conversation in Wales about reform having a majority, because although 30% of people in Wales might vote reform, 70% don't want them. Whereas in the UK, in the wider general election, there's talk about a massive majority on the back of the same report, polling. So I think it is worth bearing in mind that if you have an electoral system which reflects the views of people, you tend to get a government which might reflect people more. So I'd say that. The other thing I would say is this issue around identity. Wales is weird I keep saying that, I love Wales, but Wales is weird. And part of that is how people identify. So people identifying as Welsh, not British, not Welsh and British, just Welsh, has increased hugely. And that is especially around young people. And people who identify as Welsh in Wales have much more in common in terms of outlook of people who identify themselves as British in England. So if you identify as British in England, you're more likely to be left of centre and pro-EU and Remain voting. And that's the same in Wales. Whereas in Wales, if you define yourself as British, you are much more likely to have stuff in common with people in England who define themselves as English.
English nationalism,
Yeah. And that is slightly, to the right, and Brexit voting. So I think the role of identity in a Welsh context is really, really interesting. And this idea that the party that can best position themselves as pro-Wales, I think will do best. And it's really interesting. Reform are massively anti-devolution in lots and lots of ways. You hear them say it, you see them really sceptical of it. And there's a certain irony that they ran a campaign for Brexit where they said that decisions should be made closest to the people they affect, but also oppose devolution. But they are not having an overtly anti-devolution platform in the Welsh elections because they do not want to portray themselves as anti-Welsh. And that is a really interesting dynamic that I think people miss. And that's why the Welsh Conservatives are going to get annihilated, because they have never been able to put the Welsh in Welsh Conservatives.
Will, thank you so much for joining us today. As ever, you've brought clarity, depth, and a bit of much needed Welsh perspective to the national conversation. And you get a bonus point from me for making the case for constitutional reform. Thank you for joining us.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for this special episode of Quiet Riot. If you enjoyed the show, listeners, do please rate it and share it. Join us again soon when we'll be heading from Cardiff Bay back to Westminster for more chaos, calm, and everything in between. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
Are you ready to unlock your creativity and transform your passion for beauty into a career? Southeastern College is here to help you take your first steps towards training for a career in cosmetology. Unlock your potential and start your path towards a career making people feel confident. It's time to invest in yourself. Visit sec.edu for more information on our programs and take the first step toward training for a brand new career in cosmetology. Your before and after story starts now at Southeastern College.